Why China will shut down the Australian economy in 2023. Are you worried about the future of the Australian economy? With tensions between Australia and China at an all-time high, many experts are predicting that China will take drastic action to hurt the Australian economy in the coming years. In this video, we'll explore the reasons why China may choose to shut down the Australian economy in 2023 and what it could mean for the country and its people. Don't miss this important and eye-opening analysis. The disagreement between China and the United States has put the country's economic ties in the spotlight. Since then, attention has shifted to the ties between Australia and China, as well as the stress caused by an impending independent investigation into the origins of COVID-19 by the World Health Organization, WHO. This worldwide probe was pushed forward in part by Australia, which helped lead the charge. As a result of China's continued imposition of trade restrictions on goods originating in Australia, tensions between the two nations seem to have significantly increased. Some of the most significant limitations include a tariff of 80% on Australian barley exports, which was later followed by a ban on Australia's largest grain exporter, as well as the suspension of beef imports from 5 major meat processing factories. Additionally, China has initiated an anti-dumping inquiry against Australian wine exports, and Chinese mills were instructed to refrain from processing Australian imports. With 65% of the harvest going there, China is Australia's largest consumer for its cotton sector, which is why China receives so much of the crop. Customers in China have also been told to postpone purchases of Australian thermal and metallurgical coal. Chinese customs authorities barred the import of log lumber and delayed the import of Australian lobsters. In addition, there has been a push to deter tourists from traveling to Australia, and Chinese students have been advised to seek academic opportunities in other countries, despite the fact that COVID-19 has stopped this from happening for the time being. According to the information told above, it is quite improbable that ties between Australia and China will improve any time in the near future. China is Australia's greatest trading partner, with two-way trade hitting a record $252 billion in 2019. This accounts for 27.4% of Australia's total commerce with the rest of the world. This connection is very vital to Australia's economy. This is much greater than that of Japan, which is Australia's second biggest trading partner. Two-way commerce between the two countries was $88.5 billion in 2019. The important economic connection extends to a wide variety of sectors. According to the Australian Trade and Investment Commission, China is Australia's primary export market. China is also their largest source of international students and their most valuable tourism market. China is also a major source of direct foreign investment and our largest market for agricultural goods. In response, exports and investments have been the primary drivers of the fast expansion in the Chinese economy, despite the fact that more recently the Chinese government has been pushing a shift to services and consumption in order to support future growth and development. The China-Australia Free Trade Agreement is a key factor in the robustness of the relationship between the two countries. Since it was first implemented in December 2015, it has given Australian businesses the opportunity to investigate the potential of our biggest export market, therefore expanding their reach. Although commodities such as iron ore, coal, liquefied natural gas, and gold are undeniably our most exported products, and may potentially come under threat as a result of the current tense relations between Australia and China, service industries such as tourism and education have also suffered as a result of the COVID-19 border restrictions. The economic connection is in a precarious state right now. How dependent is Australia on China? When the China Study Centre at the University of Sydney convened a panel discussion with 4 renowned China specialists, they were all in agreement that even while ties between Australia and China may be strained at the moment, there is no danger to the business agreements over the long run. Nevertheless, they issued a warning that there would always be political and diplomatic undercurrents accompanying the connection. Hans Hendrischke, a professor at the University of Sydney who specializes in Chinese business and management, is of the opinion that severing economic ties with China would not be in either country's best interests. The economies of China and Australia are intertwined and mutually reliant. In order to recover and rebuild, China is dependent on Australia to provide it with food and iron ore. On the other hand, Australia is dependent on its exports. Agriculture is without a doubt the primary focus at this moment. The current prohibition on beef imports from 5 large meat processing companies is expected to cut the predicted $3.5 billion from exports to China by around 35% this year. Last year, Australian beef exports to China were worth $2.67 billion, and it is anticipated that the embargo will have this effect. Because there will be no barley exports in the foreseeable future, agricultural organizations are keeping a close eye on the wool business. Roughly 75% of the wool industry's revenue is dependent on demand from China. Because there has been no market for wool outside of China ever since COVID-19 started, wool export prices have fallen to their lowest point in 5 years. This has given Chinese buyers increased purchasing power, and according to the Chief Operating Officer of Rural Bank, Will Rayner, while prices would rise domestically in China if Australian wool was removed from the market, the impact would be far more significant to Australian producers than it would be to Chinese consumers. Manufacturing in Australia. COVID-19 has provided Australia with a number of important takeaways on the country's native capacity for onshore production. As a result of disruptions in international supply chains, Australian enterprises have shown their adaptability by leveraging their research and design capabilities to reroute manufacturing lines in order to manufacture personal protection equipment and other essential frontline medical supplies. As a result, many people in Australia have expressed a desire to purchase Australian goods and help our economy as they emerge from the epidemic. This might be the beginning of a recovery in the manufacturing sector in Australia. The Government of Australia has also provided a supportive response, emphasizing the need of restoring Australia's manufacturing sector as an activity that has the potential to provide much required employment in the next months and years. As part of its Job Maker plan, the federal government began a new age of manufacturing in October. This plan is intended to help the country recover from COVID-19 as well as restore the economy and generate employment. The plan selected 6 sectors of manufacturing that it wants to firmly establish within a decade, and the Prime Minister made a commitment to provide around $1.5 billion in additional financing for the strategy over the following 4 years. The capacity of Australia to successfully trade with China and scale up to satisfy the country's enormous demand has been a significant contributor to the nation's overall level of competitiveness. It may be the right moment to capitalize on this opportunity and make advantage of the extra capacity to service other international markets in addition to China. It is quite possible that there will always be a political agenda hidden under the surface of economic accords, and there will also likely always be space for advancement. Because of the trade restrictions imposed by China, there appears to be an imbalance between the two countries at the moment. Australia places a much greater emphasis on the significance of the relationship than China does, where they don't necessarily feature high on the priority list of political relationships. But despite the fact that it would appear that China has everything under control, there are ways for Australia to not only improve its trade relations and invest in a brighter future, but also to look for new opportunities for growth and new markets outside of China, perhaps by taking advantage of the recent push by the government to expand the country's manufacturing offerings. What should they do next? The next step China will take is yet uncertain. Will there be other limits placed on trade? And if that is the case, which sectors of the economy would be affected? It is important to keep in mind that the economies of China and Australia are interdependent on one another, and it is quite improbable that ties between the two countries would completely deteriorate. When looking for substitutes for iron ore, for instance, which is Australia's most valuable export commodity, China will run into some difficulties. In addition, China's demand for raw materials in the construction industry is expected to rise as the country prepares to implement further economic stimulus measures after COVID-19. The fact that Madeng Fu-Ying, who served as China's previous ambassador to Australia, called for a stop to confrontation and aggressive language in the conversations that take place between the two nations back in October is something that should give us cause for optimism. She said that China had a significant need for Australia's resources and that it was in the best interest of both nations to collaborate on a project. The Minister of Trade for Australia, Simon Birmingham, similarly said that his country was not interested in engaging in a trade war, We do not pursue our trade policy in a manner that is retaliatory in nature. This demonstrates a commitment to ensuring that Australia will make a constructive effort to deal with the conflict and preserve what has been a long-standing and successful association between the two countries. It also reveals that Australia is committed to preserving the relationship between the two countries. Thank you for watching this video on the potential impact of China on the Australian economy. We hope you have a better understanding of the complex relationship between these two countries and the potential consequences of any economic actions taken by China. Remember to stay informed and keep an eye on the news as the situation continues to develop. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos on important global issues.